mean, like, unless you're heating the thing all the time, is it going to freeze in your climate? That, you know, I mean, it's not going to freeze solid, but you might have a foot of ice on the top of the thing.
Well, yeah, you know, that's where I can practice drilling my ice fishing holes, and you know, like, it's multi-purpose. It's not just for relaxation.
Welcome to the Fine Home Building Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I'm Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Editorial Director Andrew Zellner.
Good morning.
Our Production Manager, Ian Schwant from TDS Custom Construction.
Morning, Patrick.
And our producer, Jeff Rose.
Hi.
You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. Well, gents, thanks so much for being on the show this morning. It's a pleasure to see you.
Pleasure as always, Patrick.
Andrew, how's your basement coming? I'll be brief here. I watched a YouTube video yesterday of a finished basement, and the remodeler, this was a house flip, lowered the floor without underpinning the foundation, and they held the soil back with plywood and then put a stud wall up and drywall over top of this. And the best part was they had this like partition which was kind of cordoning off the crawl space area, and they took all the concrete rubble and just like jammed it in this space. It was oh my God, I couldn't believe it. So I'm guessing you're not doing that.
No, so I removed all of my concrete rubble this summer, and it was a terrible it was a great exercise, but it was terrible for like a week. So yeah, my basement is in good shape. Yesterday we had our first day where we hit above 50, and so like I got to see my sump pit fill up with water and my pump all the water out, and like that was pretty great. And so I actually hung some drywall last week. Actually, I talked to you, Patrick, about the best way to cut out drywall for, around outlets in a non-frustrating way.
When you figured that out, let me know.
Yeah, there was still a little frustration, but by my fourth outlet, it like looks better. I'll have to do much less fixing the mud around outlets 4 and on. So.
You might not know this, but so a drywall square, it doesn't seem like an invaluable tool, but it totally is for no other reason than marking outlet boxes, because it happens to be the exact width of a plastic workbox, right?
Yeah, I landed on careful measurement and, tracing my outlet box. So, yeah, no, it's coming along. And, I was more... I'm more excited about the foundation drain on the interior and pumping water out of my basement than anything this week.
That's cool. Are you? Do you have a backup system in case of power failure? Because I think you'd agree is like in a thunderstorm is when you really need that, and that might be when the power goes out.
I don't yet. I before winter I just got the pump in, so that's kind of on my next list. I also need to move a little electricity. I've got my protected outlet nearby the sump pump, and then I want to figure out what a backup looks like. I know growing up we had a battery backup that never seemed to work when you needed it. Again, it's probably one of those maintenance things that you're supposed to do
Change
anyway.
The batteries,
but,
yeah.
That's kind of my next research project.
You have city water, right?
Yep.
There are some pumps that are backup that run off of city water. So like for every gallon of water you run through it, it pumps out 2 out of your sump basket. And I hear those are more reliable than the battery ones, but I'd have experience with neither. So
interesting. I'll have to take a look at that.
I'll try and find the manufacturer for those of you listening who might not be familiar with that product. Ian, what have you been doing? How's your basement?
My basement's great. It's where I sleep every night.
Do you have a sump pit?
We do. Yeah, it's pretty dry because of all the waterproofing that we did and the drainage stuff that we did around the foundation. But I would suggest that Andrew tries the RotoZip method, where you don't cut the boxes out, just mark the center with an X. and put the sheet up and then come through with the roto zip and try cutting them out that way.
So I've never had success with the RotoZip. I just like, yeah, I've probably only done like 20 outlets in drywall, you know. And Patrick mentioned the RotoZip too, but like I feel like you need 1,000 sheets to get to your mastery of the RotoZip.
Yeah, that might be true, but I think they're fun. I used to
Are there
hate
any
them.
special techniques to success with that tool, Ian?
I can't remember off the top of my head if it's counterclockwise or clockwise that you have to go with it, but there is one way that it works a
much
lot.
better.
It works much better. And then just the best tip that I got was just use a lot of bits. As soon as the bit doesn't cut well, throw it out. They're cheap and just go through a lot of them. But most of the efficient drywallers that I've worked with only mark centers and then put a note what the receptacle is so that the guy coming behind with a RotoZip can cut them out.
As in what it is, as in 1 gang, 2 gang, 3 gang? Yeah.
Yeah, round light, whatever the case might be.
I've had difficulty using that tool too. I mean, I have used it and had some success, but I've also made a complete disaster of some outlet boxes before.
You got to stop when it smokes. When it starts smoking back at you, that's when you stop.
Yeah.
I stop when I see little blue plastic chips start coming out of the hole.
Yeah, you're not supposed to see those. Or you're not supposed to hear grinding on metal too. That's the other one. But otherwise, most of my time is thinking about numbers, and outside of work, it's getting excited for it being spring and thinking about things that I want to do outside to the house, like put the second coat of paint on the house that I neglected to do last year because we decided to move in instead.
You gonna
be a
spray
lot
it?
of things like that. Yeah. I'm gonna spray it with an airless and then rent a lift from the local rental company. That's what I did for the siding to start.
That'll only take a few hours, right?
Yeah, especially when you're doing it only on Saturdays. I don't know how easy it's going to be to rent that lift every Saturday for a month to do that, but
You're going to have to slip the guy at the counter a C note or a box of donuts or something, is my guess.
I don't know. They got 4 of them, and I think I'm not going to be the only one.
Especially springtime, that seems like that's going to be most wanted status.
Yeah.
Jeff, you have anything to talk about this morning with regard to home projects, work projects in general?
Well, I built a railing over the weekend.
Well, that's cool.
Ironically, not for myself, but
For what?
it was for a set for not my wife's working on, so it wasn't real. It did
Tell
not
us
meet
about
code.
it. It was wood, I presume, a balustrade, like.
It was, well, actually, I bought balustrades that actually ones that I was looking at from Home Depot that I was thinking about for my deck before I decided to go with the cable rail, and then just some 1x to be the top and bottom. That's all. Just fun.
Was it enjoyable, or was this a exercise in frustration?
It was fun because it doesn't have to meet code. It's like, the balusters are 6 inches apart and things like that because it's just for pretty pictures.
There's something liberating about that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because, balustrade has to be pretty strong otherwise, but you can do whatever, right? And just screw it to the floor. Well, I've been
When I lived
painting.
in New York,
Go
I
ahead.
met a guy who was a set carpenter, and he would talk about all the stuff that like they build to just look real on sets, and how you got to really watch out with stairs because it's probably the first 2 steps are actually steps, and then after that it's like paper mache made to look like steps.
Yeah, well, yeah, she just did a staircase that the treads were all just insulation foam wrapped in.
That would be a really rude awakening when you step on that. Oh, my goodness. Well, as always, we heard from some listeners. This one is from Jerry from Michigan. It's quite long. I'm not going to read all of it, but I'm going to hit the highlights here. Jerry says, I'm a project manager for a mid-sized construction company and planning for an upcoming addition on a crawl space in southeast Michigan. I'm thinking about ways to build a conditioned crawl space a little more efficiently and effectively. I'm taking inspiration from the latest edition of the magazine article for a concrete-free slab, but my slab won't be concrete-free. Radon is a huge problem in our area, and I'm trying to reduce our reliance on closed-cell spray foam. We would normally foam in the crawl space and call it a day. So this might not be totally new, but once the footings and foundation are installed, I plan to install EPS foam insulation, then 10 mil poly across the floor, up the walls, and over the foundation. After that, we'll pour a slab. We don't always do this, but in this case, it was important to the homeowner. We'll install sill sealer over the poly on the foundation and build up from there. That should manage moisture, air, and radon in the crawl space. Our concrete guys would normally install 6 mil poly under the slab only, so the major breakthrough is carrying it up the walls and out to the exterior. This seems like a much better idea for almost no extra work. So I've done something very similar. We had a wet crawl space on a new home we built for Habitat for Humanity in Pittsburgh, and this was the engineer's fix. We put drain tile in like a kind of arranged like a fish skeleton with a pipe running down the center and kind of laterals off the side. And then we put the poly up the wall. We couldn't put it under the mud sill, obviously, because the house was there, but we stapled it and caulked it, and it seemed to work great. So I think you should do that. Ian, do you see any problem with the poly under the mud sill? Is that going to...
It's different, but I wonder if it'll just deteriorate over time.
It's not going to get UV, though, because it's going to be
True.
under the house.
Yeah. I would wonder about air sealing that properly. It's like when I did the mud sills for my house, I used acoustical sealant down to the sill seal, and then also used acoustical sealant between the sill seal and the top of the concrete. So I would wonder if the poly is going to stop you from really being able to seal that well. But if you used an exterior tape, like he talks about later on, using Sigafentrum to tape that joint from the outside, I think you'd be covered.
So we should get to that part here. So I've discovered a few things in researching for this build. First, we typically install 7/16 OSB sheathing and Tyvek on 2x6 studs, half-inch sheathing on the roof. I've been waiting to use zip on a build for a while, but couldn't justify the cost because we don't typically budget for it. I think it would make our carpenter's job simpler in getting the addition watertight, and I won't get calls over the weekend that water is leaking through a tarped roof or Tyvek is blowing around in the wind. I asked our lumber supplier what the upcharge would be, and he said 7/16 zip, alas, I'm not including tape, is actually cheaper than our typical 7/16 OSB and Tyvek for now. That's a no-brainer. On a related note, I was looking into what tape I could seal the poly to the foundation with and checking on cost on those too. We typically use Protecto Wrap Super Stick or pellet tape for most of our taping needs because that's what our suppliers sell and they seem to work well. I read Martin Holliday's Backyard Tape Test article recently and found Northern Built's cold weather tape test and was delighted to see Super Stick is punching above its weight. I love that we're rooting for tapes. That's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Punching above its weight. But Siga Wiglove is the gold standard for tricky taping. Poly, rough side OSB in freezing weather. I mean, come on. Sigafentrum may be better, but I have to turn in receipts in, and someone might see. I wanted to compare pricing with Super Stick, pellet tape, and Wiglove. Protecto Wrap Super Stick is 43 cents a foot. Pellet tape comes in at 39. Wiglove is 40. None of the premium price I was expecting. As someone who was trying to build better, working with upper middle class Midwestern budgets, I will be buying some new tape to give it a try. I wanted to share the news from the field and hope others might find it helpful. Love the podcast. Thanks for what you do, Jerry from Michigan. P.S. I thought I should give you specifics on the zip versus OSB price. 7/16 Weyerhaeuser OSB today is $42.80. 7/16 zip is $43.89. That can't be right now, Ian, right?
It's not right anymore.
Yeah.
I think I looked it up yesterday in 7/16. I don't know if it's Weyerhaeuser or what brand this particular yard carries, but it's 62 a sheet.
I've heard high as 70 for half-inch sheathing recently, so I think you should have bought it then.
Yeah.
Jerry.
And bought a truckload of it.
Yeah.
I think the Sigafentrum is close to $1 a foot.
That's what I remember.
But the key to remember is, I believe Wiglove, you have to prime the concrete, whereas Fentrum, you do not. Fentrum will actually stick to the concrete without a primer. So it's one less step.
And the
but more
primer is expensive, as I remember,
Yes.
too,
Yep.
right? It's
Yeah, and I believe for the primer you can use like any of the shellac based stuff.
So you're
Well-
allowed to use shellac-based primers instead of those specific primers for those tapes.
Because when you look on the back, it's a shellac based primer. At least the
out.
one that I got with some tape one time when I checked the back of it, it was the same as the shellac based exterior primer.
Have any of you guys heard that there is like a shortage of shellac primers and shellac? Yeah? What have you heard, Andrew?
So I've witnessed it. Witnessed it. I did some MDF wainscoting for my bathroom, and I wanted to prime all the MDF, and like there was literally just one can of the shellac based primer, like at the 3 Home Depots I went to when I was doing it.
Does anyone know why?
Nope. I just know from our painters that it's
Yeah.
not available.
It's so dire that like Fine Woodworking was had a message board where you could buy this for other workers, right? If your hardware store had some, you could post it there and let other people know. I think I have
do
some I
like
might
the,
let into the put up on Facebook Marketplace.
I do like the idea of a Midwesterner splurging on some tape. Like that really spoke to me. I was like, yeah, let's live a little.
Yeah, I don't think this is the right podcast to compare what an upper middle class Midwestern budget is compared to an upper middle class Northeast budget.
We use all the tapes here, man. It's like
Oh, you're using tape like
passing
it's
it
going
out.
out of style. Yeah.
I tape papers with wig glove just for fun, right? Just because I want it to really stick. This comes from Neil in Colorado. Love the show. In episode 439, Ian was talking about zoning where he lives and builds, effectively creating 20-acre minimum lot sizes. One of the not always so obvious effects of this art is artificial scarcity. Per Wikipedia, it says, artificial scarcity is scarcity of items despite the technology for production or the sufficient capacity for sharing. The most common causes are monopoly pricing structures, such as those enabled by laws that restrict competition or by high fixed costs in a particular marketplace. This kind of zoning requirement places artificial limits on the available buildable land, effectively driving up prices. All the lovely green space, usually touted as quality of life plays, also takes buildable land out of inventory, and in many cases, with the same effect. All the best to y'all, Neil, Colorado. Yeah, zoning definitely artificially raises prices, right?
I'm sure it
Developers
does in
come-
Colorado. He doesn't say where he is, but I know Colorado is a tough place to get your zoning things taken care of. I've read a lot about the areas that were hit with the wildfires and whether or not those areas are going to stay zoned for the density of building that was on them before.
There are also some regulations for rebuilding that you needed to
Right.
build to a higher standard too. That
Right.
yeah.
So less density, Ian, Andrew, Jeff, or more in these fire damaged areas?
Well, to Andrew's point, one of the things that I've seen is the utilities are going to give you credits for building to passive house standards or to other net zero standards. But I've also read some articles about whether or not certain lots are going to remain buildable lots because of where they're located near existing woods or in kind of questionable slope areas.
The artificial scarcity question has been coming up a lot in Minneapolis, and I may have even mentioned this on the podcast before, but the city passed the 2040 plan, which eliminated single family zoning on city lots. So every city lot, I think you can have up to 3 dwelling units, maybe 4. And the interesting thing is, like, there's been so much construction even over the last 2 years, but there's only been like a few dozen new duplex or triplex builds like within the city of Minneapolis.
So it's not helping, is what I'm hearing.
I would say, yeah, it's the zoning in and of itself doesn't seem like the silver bullet. It's gonna be more work, but I think it's a good step. And it's like, when I'm thinking about rebuilding my garage, doing some sort of ADU makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
But also, like, my lot is a tenth of an acre, and like trying to balance some green space, but also still be part of a neighborhood in a city that's part of city life.
What about setbacks, Andrew? I mean, on your tiny lot, what are they? I mean, do you have to maintain existing setbacks, or has that been changed too?
So it seems like you can ask for permission and get around them. Like right now, my garage is like on my lot line. I don't have an alley to the back, and I just have a giant hill, so the setback there isn't a big deal. But the existing lot line, if I have to come 3 or 6 feet off of that, my garage is going to be significantly smaller than what I'd like it to be.
Right. Can you like overhang the property line if you?
Well, and also making sure your neighbors can get some sun in their backyard too. There's part of the zoning equation is also like tear down of existing city houses and building giant ones. There's some of that going on too.
We're seeing a lot of old stock get torn down and replaced with large multifamilies here. Near our office, they even tore down one strip mall and are putting a large multifamily unit there with a commercial on the first floor.
Well, it's interesting to watch this play out in different cities. It's a problem everywhere, and it seems to be zoning changes are one way that they're attempting to increase affordability. This comes from Andrew K. in sunny, muddy Michigan. Hey, podcast crew. Happy Saturday. While I was boiling maple syrup, my brother shared this interesting video with me from Michigan State University about their recent developments around solar. It seems as if they were able to incorporate translucent solar technology into both new window assemblies and are working on retrofits for existing windows. Of course, in my mind, I immediately jumped to, holy crap, I would not want to wire all of that. Me too. But it does provide an interesting alternative to the traditional solar farms / panels. Thought I would share. Keep up the awesome work. Andrew K., Michigan. So did you guys watch this little YouTube video?
I did. Mm-hmm. How do we get it to Elon Musk so he throws like, $100 million at this and gets it moving a lot faster than it's going to at the university research level?
So what it shows is what looks like an ordinary piece of insulated glass. It's tiny. It was like probably 3 inches square, and it had like terminals on it, and they hook it up to some wires that then powers this little tiny DC fan motor, which it was supremely cool.
Yeah.
That's exciting technology, and like the thing is always going to be driven by price, right? And 3 inches of glass versus a whole house of glass, or a whole house of windows that are glass.
I watched the follow-up video where they interviewed the research professor working on this, and he talked about it starting in his mind when he lived in Boston, and he would see the glass-sided skyscrapers going up and just thinking, what if that was a solar energy
PV panels?
harvesting?
Yeah. No kidding. There were like gazillions of square feet of that kind of curtain wall in this country, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe Elon Musk listens to this podcast. You get a lot of interesting people writing in. He's listening. Throw some money at this.
Elon, get with it, man. This is your opportunity. Brad says he has the last word on installing cabinets on metal studs. All right, Brad, we'll see if that's true. One last idea for installing upper cabinets on metal studs. Most commercial millworkers will glue and screw French cleats to the drywall and studs. Also, if you're going out to the wood shop to get away and watch a ball game, I put on an audio loop of workshop noises on the loudspeakers and listen to the game with earphones.
I love it. That's brilliant.
In a previous role, I was part of a Secret Santa gift exchange, and it was at the craft council, and the person who got my name was the librarian at the craft council. And as part of the gift exchange, you had to like list your interests, and I listed old woodworking machinery and local beer, and so I ended up getting a 6-pack of beer and like a custom burned CD of like vintage machinery noises that like she found, one of her library pals found in their archives, somewhere. And it's it's not something I want to listen to every day, but I would definitely put it on and then listen to something else in headphones.
So can you walk around and just like hear and think, oh, that's like a 1940s Oliver 12-inch joiner. I have that on CD.
Of course he knows them by ear.
Yeah, and it's also they sound different depending on which species of wood you're joining. So
Definitely
And how sharp the
Honduran
tooling
mahogany.
is, right?
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
tell that, yeah. Of course.
Honduran mahogany on a 12-inch Oliver joiner, and I think the
Right.
third knife is a little dull.
Oh, I can't wait for this next question here. This comes from Rick in Guelph, Ontario. That's Canada, for those of you who don't know where Ontario is. Hi, all. I actually ran across these connectors planning a temporary fix for electric fans for my Land Rover, but I have some outlets in the house to renew, and I think these are going to be just the ticket. Have you looked at these, or have they come up in any of your Pro Talk sessions? I recently watched number 411 with David Shapiro. Enjoyed the common sense. They seem solid and aren't the old push-in items like in the back of an outlet. I plan to use them on a variety of fixtures and even some old lamps. So what he's talking about are push-in wire nuts, or as they call them in Canada, morettes, which someone explained that to me. I had to look it up. So
I've heard them called that before by old electricians, but I just knew them as like wire nuts or connectors.
yeah, I've never heard morettes before.
it's named for the inventor, I believe. And I'll put a Wikipedia page on the history of twist-on wire nuts for those of you who are interested. I read the whole thing. But they are cool. They're very cool. I've not used them either. What I don't like about them theoretically is if you ever want to change your mind and take the connection back apart, I find those very difficult to get the wires back out of there. And maybe it's just a matter of you cut them off and restrip the conductors, but
You can't pop that cover back open once you've jammed
I think
the
you
wires
can.
in
It just, I mean, the ones I've seen, you have to jam a little tiny screwdriver in there and push down the spring, much like you would one of the receptacles or devices he's talking about. But it seems like the one he linked from Wago, it might be easier than other styles I've seen. He says, I'm no pro, but I did rewire my house in the late 80s from 30 amp knob and tube up to 200 amps with the blessing of a helpful hydro inspector. I was okay with the morettes, twist nuts, but these seem compact and simple. I'm sticking with a Wago brand from Germany as I've seen not so great reviews on other versions, and that's what I would say too.
I love that he states that he's out there doing a temporary fix on the fans on his Land Rover. It just makes me think of listening to Click and Clack with my dad going out on Sunday mornings and how they used to call Land Rovers rolling boat payments, or whenever a Land Rover would come to the shop, usually on the back of a flatbed, you knew you were going to make your mortgage payment that month.
Oh
It's
my
like
God,
they
that's
just
hilarious.
had a never-ending list of Land Rover jokes.
And they always have electrical problems, as I recall, too.
Yep.
It's, yeah. Oh, that's hilarious. Rick, let us know what you think of those. I think they're very cool. I had one electrician tell me one time that he didn't use them often, but when someone had cut the conductors too short in the box and it was difficult to get a nut on them, that he would use these to splice wires when they were too short. So pretty cool. We will be right back after this word from our sponsor. If you run a home service business like painting, contracting, lawn care, or cleaning, your to-do list is endless. From hiring staff to mountains of paperwork, not to mention doing the actual work that pays the bills. Jobber is a mobile and online app that helps you organize your business and look professional. With Jobber, you can quote jobs, schedule your crew, invoice, and get paid all in one place. Try it free today at getjobber.com/finehomebuilding. This comes from Ken in Rindge, New Hampshire. Hey, podcast crew, I have a sauna kit arriving at my New Hampshire house in a few weeks, and it's time to build the platform on which it will sit. I'm thinking of using the Tough Blocks with 2x10 PT joists and then some 1x6 PT decking on top. But given that we will be using the sauna in the winter too, do you think I should sandwich some foam insulation on that deck? If so, how? There is no insulation in the floor of the sauna kit that I can tell, and if there is, it's minimal. The sauna is 7x7, and I think I'll make the platform 9x12 to leave room for a bench to sit and put on shoes. Thanks for your advice on this. What do you guys think about saunas?
I think they're a hot item right now.
Heyo.
After I get off this podcast, we're going to look at a job with some mechanical guys, and there is a sauna designed into the basement of this house. And we just finished a job that had a sauna, so they're out there. People are putting them in.
What do you think of sauna, Ian?
I'm not a fan of the heat, so I'm not a fan of the sauna either.
How about you, Jeff? You like the sauna?
Yeah, I do. I haven't done it in a long time, but
Andrew, your thoughts on saunas?
I would say it's a fun experience, but I don't feel the need to own my own sauna. There's a lot of northern Minnesota. There's a big Finnish, immigrant derived population up there, and so like a lot of friends with cabins up there. They've got their sauna, and it's a tradition to get in the sauna and heat up, and then go jump in the lake. And it's a refreshing, invigorating activity. Which if I were living in Finland and didn't have anything else to do, it seems like a fantastic thing. But I still like just sitting in a vat of hot water, in a hot tub. Like that's more my style.
I've been in a few times and immediately want to get out. I just find it so impossibly dry and uncomfortable. And I know there's wet saunas and dry saunas. They don't have wet saunas like in the hotels and stuff where I've experienced this. They're always dry saunas, and it's horrible. Anyway, back to the question. I think you want insulation in there. You don't want your feet to be cold, right? And it's going to add considerably to the heat load if you don't have insulation in the floor and it's zero out, for example, right? Floor is going to be zero.
Yeah. Do you think some kind of foam board, exterior grade plywood sandwich type thing to give them a thermal break from the ground?
We need that cricket sound again, Jeff. I don't know. I don't know anything about this. I mean, it's going to be wet, right? Theoretically.
I'm wondering what the underneath of the sauna is made of, if you can add any insulation in there before it gets installed.
Dig it. Yeah, I think that's the way to go. Because my presumption is that the sauna floor is made of some rot-resistant species that's made to get wet. And I think you'd want to put those underneath that.
Like a cut and cobble type thing.
The best insulation projects are all cut and cobble.
That sauna is not going to be built on like 16 on center floor joists or something easy, right?
Right. It is only 7x7, which is going to mean like supreme amounts of waste if you buy 2x8 or 4x8 sheets of material, right? Yeah, I was glad to have you both on the show because this is seems to be a Midwestern tradition more so than here in Greenwich. Although a lot of folks had them in northern Vermont, and including a couple of my friends have them, and it seems like something you do where it's really cold, just to
feel like outside, you can live again.
Yeah, outside and not die.
Yeah, I think a friend of mine, Mark Pollard, I think he's the production manager for Juniper Design Build on Peaks Island. He had a couple of Instagram posts. I think he built one for himself, just totally not a kit, built it in his backyard in Maine. So you've got a little bit of that in the Northeast, I think.
Was it a barrel sauna or a building sauna?
It was a building, yeah. It was like a building for a couple of people, and then I forget what he used for his heat and steam source.
I've one of the projects on my bucket list is is a hot tub, but made out of cedar, like with the barrel and
Oh my
just some
gosh, I used to
straps.
see those in the back of Popular Mechanics when I was a kid and so wanted one. And you heat it with wood instead of a electric heater, right? And it makes it more affordable.
Yeah. And it feels more in line than like for me at least than like a bunch of plastic and insulation. It's just like, this is your tub. You start a fire, it'll be warm eventually. You get in.
That seems cool. I love the look of those too, compared
And
to
it's-
like the gel-coated fiberglass thing, right?
So it's actually like a wood barrel that you're sitting
Yeah,
in.
basically. And if you flip that
Cool.
on its side, you can turn it into a sauna.
Huh. Wow.
Seasonally, you could change it, right?
Are you going to use any tape to like air seal that anywhere?
Nah, it's just the water swells or wood swells when it gets exposed to water. So
I mean, like, unless you're heating the thing all the time, is it going to freeze in your climate? I mean, it's not going to freeze solid, but you might have a foot of ice on the top of the thing.
well, yeah, that's where I can practice drilling my ice fishing holes, and like it's multi-purpose. It's not just for relaxation, Patrick.
Right, of course. This comes from a GBA question. M. Gensler. Hi, I'm looking for advice to fix my cold floor on piers. We're in zone 4A. The current assembly is carpet pad, 3/4 inch plywood, 9.5 I-joist, spaced 16 inches on center, fiberglass bats, and then 5/16 fiber cement hardy panels on the underside. The space is a master bedroom, which was an addition in 2004. We've disconnected the HVAC pipes and are running in two joist space and located the mini splits into a closet. Now all the HVAC is in the conditioned space. The blower door test shows leaks along the plywood seams in the floor and around the perimeter of the floor. We plan to tape plywood seams with Tescon Vanna and caulk the perimeter with Contega HF. Boy, we are really name dropping the tapes today, people. I'm looking for advice on how to best air seal and insulate the floor. The addition is on a slope and is an approximately 6 feet to 14 feet off the ground. The floor space is approximately 17 by 17. So we get asked this question quite a bit. It's a common problem on room additions that are set up on piers. Nobody air seals the floor adequately, and these floors often are cold. And I think we always say the same thing, is you have to seal the bottom, right, and make the cavity work. With the air blowing through it, it's not going to work. So tape the bottom, tape the top, tape both, I think is our possible plans of attack.
It seems that it's compounded by that it's on a slope and that it's not going to be easy to work underneath it with the 6 foot to 14 foot change. That's quite the slope that he's on.
Yeah.
We recently did a project here where part of the house was built over an old porch and we couldn't get underneath it. So we cut a 1 foot wide swath out of the subfloor all the way around the space so that our insulator could get in there, spray foam the rim joists, and then dense pack it with cellulose, which was one of the suggestions that he got on GBA. So I would look into doing something like that if you can't work underneath it.
So skip the tape on the bottom, and dense packing will sufficiently stop air movement, you expect?
I think it'll do a lot for him
Yeah.
because this is so far from a perfect situation. Trying to apply, perfect building science to it is going to be really difficult. I think you're just going to have to get it as best as you possibly can. But I would do the tape and caulking on the perimeter, and it wouldn't hurt to tape the seams of the subfloor.
Yeah, if you got the carpet up, especially, right?
Yeah.
That's a no-brainer.
Yeah, because they're pulling the carpet up, I think they can do a lot of it from the interior.
Andrew, you have thoughts on this?
I mean, I immediately went to, well, how about radiant in-floor heat? Like just heat your cold floor.
That's a very unfine home building suggestion, but
Well, and so it's driven by, I just got my textbook on modern hydronic heating.
Wow.
And I'm, thinking, thinking, so like there are a bunch of really cool, sheet good like products that have grooves for radiant, hydronic heating in them already. And I know it's not like ideal from a building science perspective, but we're not dealing with an ideal building. But it is like, it's probably too small of a space to do hydronic, and then you're looking at electric, and that gets very expensive very quickly. But that's where my mind went at first until I saw it was 17 by 17.
Jeff, do you have suggestions on what M. Gensler might do about their cold floor?
No, I was just thinking about, also taping the seams on the underside, just keep air out as much as possible.
I think that's what I would do. And, to Ian's point, it is going to suck, but I would build some temporary staging, right? And if it's on piers, hopefully there's posts and they're not concrete, because you could nail temporary staging or build it off of those posts that are already there, which might make it easier to get up to that 17. How tall is it? By 14 foot off the ground? Or it's an opportunity to rent a lift.
Always got to take an opportunity to rent a lift or a bulldozer or a backhoe.
Oh my God! So you could level it.
Just build it again. Yeah.
Patrick is next going to say, just rent a crane, lift it up, and put it on a foundation.
Well, it's funny. We did a story in Fine Home Building that's kind of what they did. The pier addition was very close to the ground, so they actually built the floor up in the air and then lowered it into position after they sheathed the bottom and air sealed it with tape. Air sealed and on piers is the feature name. I'll put that in the podcast notes. This comes from Corey. During the discussion with the rep from Mitsubishi, a brief section was spent on retrofitting with ducted variable flow units, but you have to be cautious if it has bad ducting, was the message I took away. I can understand that some bad ductwork is obvious if there is significant leakage and the constant flow may not work well with leaky ducts, but how bad does it have to be? How does one know if their ducts are leaky enough to not consider a variable flow unit? There was mention of flex ducts installed poorly, but does that mean if the flex duct is present, then variable flow units should not be considered at all? I'm always weary asking HVAC people because they might tell you what you want to hear to make a sale. Do you have any thoughts? Okay, so I don't think flex duct is inherently bad. A flex duct can be installed well. That is to say, the inner liner can be pulled tight, which makes it more efficient at flowing air, or it can be installed with curly cues, or, it's like you could install it terribly. So I wouldn't say that that's necessarily bad, but the bigger question is, how do you know when your ductwork is not up to the job of a high-performance heat pump or air conditioner? And I don't know.
Really? You can. It's a similar test to a blower door test.
I was going to say, isn't there a blower door for
you use?
And you want to determine static pressure and leakage both, right? If either are too flawed, then we have to address it.
Yeah, and you can address it by using that. It's the same product that they use for aero barrier, but it's pumped through the ducts and seals up the ducts. It's actually, I think, it might be part of the building code in certain areas that you have to do that if you're going to have metal duct work in a new home.
Especially when it's in unconditioned spaces, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the rub.
Yeah.
Well, so I've heard mixed reviews on that AeroSeal, because oftentimes the return ductwork is so dramatically undersized. It doesn't matter if it's leaking, and actually sometimes you increase static pressure. If you seal it, you make it worse. So oftentimes, like it's a bigger fix than simply blowing that stuff in to seal the holes, from what I've heard.
Doesn't that get into more of an issue about the design of the ductwork and whether or not it was properly sized to begin with.
Yeah, there's generally more problems on the return side than the supply side because when rooms are cold, people don't like it. When your furnace doesn't get enough air, they don't know. It just
Right.
it just doesn't work like it should.
I've been frequently told by my mechanical contractor here in Madison to just avoid touching existing ductwork as much as possible because of
Assume it's bad.
But yeah, the cost escalation to try and bolt new to old, either redo it all or do as little as possible in the design.
Corey, you need a good HVAC technician to evaluate your system, or you need a building performance expert to do a duct blaster test. And the duct blaster rig is a lot like a blower door, except the fan is smaller, and they're going to tape it to like a central return, which most homes have, and they're going to pressurize the system, and it's going to tell you how much static pressure you have and the leakage rate, and then you'll go from there and decide if you can use a high performance equipment. I mean, I would tell you to fix it regardless of what you put in there. Just because it works doesn't mean it's a good idea.
And you followed up with him and got more information about what he was doing with this project, right?
Yeah, so Corey asked another question here. He says, a separate question on variable flow units. I'm thinking through a basement finishing project. Would it be better to install a new VRF unit and hide the rigid duct and soffit, or install multiple units / ceiling cassettes for different zones? So my first question to Corey was like zones. You know, basements have pretty low load compared to the rest of the house. They don't have doors and windows. They are sheltered by the earth. Concrete is very airtight. Band joists are leaky, but basements generally have low load. So I asked him what he was doing, and he's got a big basement. Is the long and short of it? It was what, 1,200 square feet, right, Ian?
Yeah. Yeah, he gave us a little picture of what he had drawn out to do.
You made the point that VRF units are largely relegated to commercial buildings with much bigger heating and cooling loads and variable loads. Like you might be heating one space and cooling your server room, for example, and this equipment can do that, whereas most mini split setup, even with multiple heads, can only do heating and cooling at a time, right?
Right.
So I don't know if he means a VRF, like Mitsubishi's city units, I think they call them, or just a variable refrigerant heat pump. You know, a normal central variable flow heat pump. I don't think you're going to need that many. I don't think you're going to need multiple heads, Corey. I just don't think there's going to be that much load, and you know, basements don't get that hot in the summertime either. He does have some windows.
And he mentioned to you that he was leaning toward 2-inch foam board on the walls with 2x4 studs, and he doesn't have any water issues, so he doesn't need to likely be thinking about dehumidification, which was a big part in Chad and I designing the system that we ultimately used for our house. Was we were much more concerned with dehumidification than we were heat and cooling load.
And he's not going to condition a big chunk of this basement, right? It's like half of it or a third of it anyway, right?
Yeah, judging by his drawing that he sent us, it looks like it's probably 2/3. He's got a pretty large unfinished storage space with his bathroom and an office and a living room. So I don't think it's going to have nearly the load that he expects it's going to have, especially if he can insulate it and separate it from that storage area, so that if the storage area is just stealing heat from above, it's not going to take as much from the basement area.
So is there a load calculation he should be doing?
I would think that's one of the first things he would want to do, and see if his current system can absorb that load.
I think that's the way to go.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's only going to take a couple more takeoffs to condition that whole space, is my guess, right? Why not go there. Start there with redoing the ducts, replacing the equipment upstairs, and just add supply and returns to this basement space. And you could even zone it separately with a zone damper if you want to stick to the forced air system. And there's some caveats with doing that, but I've heard they can work pretty good if done intelligently.
To his point, though, if he does call the wrong type of HVAC place, they're probably just going to try and sell him on a shiny, new, expensive system for the house that may or may not be necessary.
So here's another question. How do you find a good HVAC contractor? I mean, maybe the places to ask on GBA, for folks in your region that might be able to steer you in the right direction. But
I think that's a great place to start. You could also call other general contractors and ask them who they use. Even if you get somebody in the office, you're likely to find someone who knows the HVAC place that a contractor typically uses, or look for ones that you see at other job sites or see a lot of their vehicles around.
how do you know that they're a good outfit, though? I mean, it's such a mixed bag.
It is a mixed bag, but I think with the way the internet is and the ease of communication, you can just call other people who have used HVAC contractors and do your own due diligence. That's why I would start with, reputable contractors or remodelers in your area and find out who they're using.
I would also go to equipment manufacturers, trusted brands, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not the like mid-tier and low-level stuff, because anyone will install those, right? It's a price point thing. But if you're a Lennox dealer or a Trane dealer or a Mitsubishi dealer or a Carrier dealer, this top-tier equipment, those companies have a vested interest in good installers and people being happy with their systems, right? Because you're paying more. And maybe that's a place to start. I think Mitsubishi has what they describe as diamond dealers, who are people that are theoretically more knowledgeable about HVAC and building science than run-of-the-mill HVAC tech.
I know that the guys I dealt with at Mitsubishi, they welcome people to reach out to them directly. I've talked to a few different ones, and they're more than willing to help a single homeowner try and get the right system for their house. Because, like Patrick said, they do have a vested interest in their equipment being installed correctly and applied correctly to the home.
Yeah. The downside is it's going to cost more, but this is not the place to skimp. This is the place where it has to work. The things, if it doesn't work, you're going to spend the money anyway.
And you're going to spend the money on whatever fuel you're using for your HVAC system, whether it's propane, natural gas, electric. If the system isn't working right and it's costing you more on the operational side,
And
something to be avoided.
I don't remember where Corey lives, but where you guys are, I mean, losing your heat is a big deal.
Yep. I think he said he's in Virginia, if I remember right.
So cooling in Virginia is a big deal, right? It's you want that to work. Yeah, you want that to work.
Yeah, Roanoke. So I think he's in coastal Virginia then as well.
Even more humid.
Yeah.
Jeff, do you have any thoughts on HVAC systems, reusing ductwork, comfort?
Not really, no. I have more questions than I have answers. That's.
I think that's what everybody has, right,
Yeah.
Patrick? It's more questions than answers about what to do with existing HVAC systems.
Jeff, can I guess that your house probably has its original central heating and air conditioning system?
Yes.
And I'm guessing you have in the back of your mind that you're going to need to replace this at some point, right?
Definitely, yeah. Well, definitely it's in my mind just because of
The age of
what
it.
we talk about.
What we talk about, right? And I mean, only the most ambitious DIYers replace their heating and cooling system, and I would argue, you can't do air conditioning. Would you attempt to do that, even with your diehard DIY nature?
No, that's beyond me. That's I mean,
You would do it though, Patrick, when you installed your own septic system.
I wouldn't do that again. The amount of money I saved was probably not worth it. It was in the order of, my guess is $2,000 to $3,000. So, I mean, that's not a lot of money.
yeah, but you
I
got
have
to use the
installed
backhoe.
I did get to use the backhoe for a week, which
That's
has
priceless.
its own
Yeah.
dividends, right?
Yeah.
I have installed furnaces first from my uncle, when I was working for him as a teen, and I did my own central heating plant swap in our house in Stowe. Working with gas and propane is risky. You need to know what the heck you're doing, because if you get that wrong, you can really hurt yourself. And if you do the ductwork wrong, the thing won't work. So, I mean, it's really not an easy DIY project. I'm sure there are folks out there who can be trained to do it, but it's not. I don't think I would do it again, because I don't have the means to evaluate my ductwork without, I would need a duct blaster test, and I think that's part of the deal. If anyone has any suggestions on what Corey should do with regard to evaluating his return ductwork, I would love to hear that. If you have any thoughts on how to get a good HVAC contractor, would also like to know that. So I want to appeal to folks who listen to the podcast. Please subscribe to the magazine or website. Tell us what you think of the show, and make sure you send us your questions. We love hearing from you and your feedback. It is super cool to hear from our cool listeners.
It's my favorite thing about the podcast. We
Me
hear
too.
what people are thinking about, and it's so valuable.
And they're smart. They're really,
They're,
really.
they're thinking really intelligently about
Yeah.
things, which is something I love about this community.
It's super cool. You guys have anything to share before we part company?
No.
All right.
No.
What's up, Andrew? You were going to say something.
Oh, I was gonna say, watch for a feature story on ductwork coming out soon.
Yes.
Patrick's working on that right now. So
It's strategies to get your ductwork correct. And don't forget about Pro Talk Live, which is April 21st in Portland, Oregon. And Andrew and I are going to be out there greeting folks, and I hope to see you.
should be a good time.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. There's happy hour. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Andrew, Ian, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please, please, please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps the folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Size your ductwork right.